Chapter 201 Gold Armored Beast. The words Thunder God General seemed to contain infinite attraction. Many young people were attracted. Zhou Wen and company went over to take a look as well. After all, Thunder God General was a very famous companion beast. He had the reputation of being the best offensive pet with potent defensive abilities. Be it his companion form or his pet form, he had extremely powerful attacks. The most famous aspect of Thunder God General was his primordial energy skill, Thunder God Augmentation. It could augment a person with lightning from the void, giving a person infinite power to battle an enemy. Every strike had terrifying lightning power accompanying it. It struck extreme fear into the hearts of people. Furthermore, even in his companion form, Thunder God Sword, Thunder God Augmentation could still be used. Even someone who had never cultivated a lightning elemental primordial energy skill would be able to use the Thunder God Sword that came with sword beams imbued with lightning. The reputation of Thunder God General as the #1 legendary offensive pet was definitely not unfounded. However, that was if one had the Thunder God Augmentation. However, Thunder God had a total of 4 skills, so even if one hatched him, he might not have Thunder God Augmentation. Without the Thunder God Augmentation, Thunder God General was an ordinary legendary companion beast. It was nothing compared to the best legendary offensive pet. Therefore, whether Thunder God General was worth anything depended on whether he had the Thunder God Augmentation skill. Unfortunately, the items sold here were all companion eggs. Even with X-ray vision, it was impossible to tell the stats or skills available to the companion beasts. Hence, there were many onlookers, but none of them were willing to pay for it. The price of a Thunder God General companion egg was 2 million. This was definitely not too much to buy the best legendary offensive pet. However, if Thunder God General didn't have Thunder God Augmentation when he was hatched, he would be worth at most 100,000 or so. Spending 2 million to buy it was no doubt a waste. Therefore, many people just watched. It was very nicely priced. It made those who wanted to buy it still feel the pinch. Yet, they would find it unacceptable giving it up. After all, Thunder God General companion egg was extremely rare. Zhou Wen pretended to take a picture with his phone and glanced at Thunder God General companion egg stats. He discovered that it was Thunder God General with 2 skills, and one of the skills was the Thunder God Augmentation. If it's a Thunder God General with Thunder God Augmentation, 2 million would be worth it. I'm just afraid it doesn't have it. Spending 2 million for trash would be a terrible loss. Li Xuan was also tempted. If you know that it has the Thunder God Augmentation skill, would you even have a chance of making a comment? It would long have been sold. A blonde youth said disdainfully. That's odd. Why are there dogs barking randomly in Holy City? Li Xuan asked Zhou Wen in surprise. Perhaps someone's dog wasn't tied up and ended up running out, Zhou Wen added. The blonde youth's expression instantly darkened, but he didn't turn hostile. He only said coldly, "Are the people from East District so uncultured?" "For us from East District, that's only reserved for the cultured," Li Xuan said, unwilling to be outdone. "Very good. I won't argue with you. After we enter the Holy Land, we'll settle the scores," the blonde youth said without any expression. "I'll be your guest." After Li Xuan said that, he ignored him. He looked at Thunder God General companion egg before asking Zhou Wen. "Unfortunately, Wang Lu isn't here. With her luck, she would definitely be able to help me get one that has Thunder God Augmentation. It's only 2 million. That shouldn't be a huge sum to you. It's good to bet. If you score one and obtain the best legendary offensive pet, it will be worth a lot more than 2 million. Zhou Wen secretly nudged Li Xuan in the direction, hoping that he would buy the Thunder God General. He already had Banana Fan and had recently picked up Bamboo Blade. He didn't lack any weapons. As for offensive pets, his mutated demonized general was in no way inferior to the Thunder God General. There was no need to buy another one. Alright, I'll take that bet. Li Xuan gritted his teeth and bought the Thunder God General companion egg under everyone's gaze. 2 million to buy a Thunder God General companion egg. There are so many vulgarians in rural cities, someone mocked Li Xuan. Although Thunder God General companion eggs were rare, they were only worth 400,000 to 500,000 on the market due to the low probability of possessing Thunder God Augmentation. Buying it for 2 million was indeed expensive. This was also why nobody had bought it despite the huge crowd. However, Li Xuan didn't mind. He went shopping with Zhou Wen and Ah Sheng at other stalls. He had plenty of wealth and wasn't stingy with his money. He bought several legendary companion eggs consecutively. "Will you have the time to incubate so many companion eggs?" Zhou Wen said with a frown. "Since I can't incubate it outside, I'll take it into the Holy Land. After all, we need to stay in the Holy Land for at least 10 days. There will be time." Li Xuan seemed to be full of confidence, but he changed the topic and said, "However, I want to incubate Thunder God General before entering the Holy Land. I'm just too curious. I wonder if he has Thunder God Augmentation." There were rooms prepared by the League government. Li Xuan and company each requested a room while the former began incubating the Thunder God General companion egg. Zhou Wen already knew what the outcome would be, so he wasn't too concerned. He sat down on the sofa in the living room and took out the companion egg Ouyang Lan had prepared for him. He glanced at it with his mysterious phone. Gold Armored Beast, Legendary. Life Providence, Steel Protection. Strength, 19. Speed, 11. Constitution, 20. Primordial energy, 12. Talent skill, tempered steel. Companion form, armor. Just by looking at the attributes, he knew that the companion beast was definitely an excellent grade legendary companion beast. Furthermore, it was one with an extremely high defense. It was very likely to be on par with the three-eyed golden warrior. The most critical thing was that the gold armored beast's companion form was armor. It was obviously given to him by Ouyang Lan to save his life. Li Xuan ran out from his room with a broadsword wrapped in lightning bolts as he shouted excitedly, "Jackpot! Jackpot! I never expected that I'd have such a day. Old Joe. My Thunder God General has 2 skills. One of them is Thunder God Augmentation. Don't tell me you want the entire world to know that you have a true Thunder God General." Zhou Wen was speechless. What's the harm? Although as Li Xuan said that, he quickly stowed Thunder God General away. With no one knowing, Thunder God General would make an excellent trump card. They did some preparatory work before bidding Ah Sheng farewell in preparation to head for the Holy Land's entrance. Go in later. Head in when the 24 hours are almost up. That way, you can avoid meeting most people. They won't wait that long since they will be vying for the qualifications, Ah Sheng said. All right. Zhou Wen was very patient, so there was no rush. Although Li Xuan didn't think so, he patiently waited for Zhou Wen to head in with him. Zhou Wen had previously asked if Li Xuan wanted to head in himself to prevent him from being marked by the youths of the 6 hero families. However, Li Xuan didn't mind at all. Since they came together, he believed that it was natural for them to enter together. Article 202 of 1597. Chapter 202 Sky Battle. The way he entered the Holy Land made Zhou Wen question life. He and Li Xuan stood on a stone pillar and the stone pillar descended like an elevator. Zhou Wen originally believed that the Holy Land was underground, but after the stone pillar's long descent, he suddenly felt the ground beneath him give way. Then, he realized that he was in the air, surrounded by floating clouds with mountains beneath his feet. How is this possible? We were clearly descending, so how did we end up in the sky? Zhou Wen was alarmed as he sized up the ground beneath him. Soon, he realized that the area below wasn't Holy City's territory. There were no mountains near Holy City, but there were endless mountain ranges below. Li Xuan didn't have the God-Fiend life providence, so he didn't have the ability to levitate, preventing him from examining his surroundings as Zhou Wen did. Instead, he summoned a huge eagle pet and landed on its back. At the same time, he flew towards Zhou Wen and pulled him onto the back of the giant eagle. How magical. This is the Holy Land, a sacred place. No one knows where the Holy Land is, but it's definitely not underground anyway, Li Xuan said as he looked at the surrounding mountains and rivers. Which holy temple are you going to? Zhou Wen asked. I cultivate in the invincible Kanate divine art. This primordial energy art corresponds to the Kanate infinite physique, so I'll be going to the Kanate holy temple. Li Xuan replied, it's highly likely that the Yin family made you cultivate the Sun strafe art, right? In that case, you should go to the Sun divine temple. However, from the looks of it, your primordial energy doesn't look like it's of the Sun strafe art pedigree. I've never cultivated the Sun strafe art, so it doesn't matter where I go. Since you are going to the Kanate holy temple, I'll go somewhere else to try my luck. Zhou Wen naturally wasn't willing to compete with Li Xuan. Every physique only chose one person. If Zhou Wen snatched it away, Li Xuan would definitely not have one. Alright, where shall we meet later? Li Xuan asked. I haven't decided where to go for the time being. If there's nothing special, let's meet up after we exit this place. If Zhou Wen wanted to vie for the special physique, he probably had to fight the youths from the 6 heroes' families. He was unwilling to involve Li Xuan. In that case, I'll accompany you to find a suitable holy temple. After all, the test lasts 10 days. It doesn't matter when one visits it. I'm not in a rush either, Li Xuan said with a smile. Seeing how Li Xuan insisted on accompanying him, Zhou Wen could only say, if that's the case, let's head to the Kanate holy temple first. Alright. Li Xuan didn't stand on ceremony as he let the giant eagle fly east. Shortly after they flew off, they saw more than 10 people riding on flying mounts. Leading them was someone Zhou Wen still remembered. It was none other than Saint John from the Cape family. Zhou Wen, do you think you can escape trouble just by entering late? John said coldly as he rode on a flying lion. As they spoke, the group had already surrounded Zhou Wen and Li Xuan in all directions. Unable to charge out of the encirclement, the giant eagle could only spiral around in the middle. John, if you wish to have another battle, I'll take up your challenge anytime. Zhou Wen shot Li Xuan a glance. Li Xuan immediately understood and controlled the giant eagle to land on the ground. Trying to run? Aren't you an overly naive one? John sneered as he gave the order. More than 10 people together with their companion beasts attacked simultaneously. Without a word, Zhou Wen summoned the banana fan and sent a gust of grand yin wind at John. I wasn't prepared the last time, allowing you to successfully sneak an attack on me with your companion beast. This time, you won't have another chance. John clearly came prepared. Upon seeing Zhou Wen's grand yin wind approach, he didn't fluster or show any intention of dodging. When the grand yin wind reached John, it was as if it had encountered an invisible barrier that splashed sideways. No damage was dealt to John nor the lion beast that he was sitting on. Zhou Wen was slightly surprised and he found it odd. However, time didn't permit him to ponder over the reason. The attacks of the other 10+ companion beasts had already circled him, nearly sealing off all routes of retreat for him and Li Xuan. Just as Zhou Wen was about to go all out, he suddenly heard a young bird's tender chirping. It was the yellow-feathered chick. This fellow had been following Zhou Wen all this time. As it stood on Zhou Wen's shoulder, a mere chirp was enough to make the dozen or so flying pets suddenly lose control and be thrown into disarray like a kite with a broken string. Zhou Wen took a careful look and knew that it was all thanks to the yellow-feathered chick. The flying companion beasts who were randomly flying about were all birds. Only a minority, like John's flying lion, wasn't affected. With the opponent's lineup in chaos, there was a weakness to exploit despite the attacks of the ones remaining. Li Xuan controlled the giant eagle to rush out of the encirclement and quickly landed on a nearby mountain. Chase after him. John gritted his teeth and chased after him. The dozen or so disciples of the 6 hero families also joined in the chase. John, are you really going to fight me to the death? Zhou Wen stood on the back of the giant eagle as he stared at the chasing John. You don't have to die. We are very fair. Back then, Tianzuo injured our family members. Now, since you are here on behalf of the Yin family, we will also be very fair. All we need to do is cripple your primordial energy C and maim you, John said coldly. And Tianzuo had crippled your family members once. Don't force me to do the same thing, Zhou Wen said as he looked at the approaching John. Haha, do you really think you're in Tianzuo? You're just representing the Yin family. Your name isn't in Tianzuo. The pets you rely on are completely useless against me. Who are you to act so arrogantly in front of me? John held his sword as he began to condense light of judgment. He was prepared to finish Zhou Wen and company in midair, preventing them from having a chance to escape back to the ground. Zhou Wen didn't say anything else as he took out the bamboo blade. With one hand holding the scabbard and the other holding the hilt, he said to Li Xuan, you leave first. Then, he leapt up and flew towards John who was charging at him. Old Zhou, what are you doing? Li Xuan was alarmed. He wanted to stop Zhou Wen, but it was too late. So you have a death wish. John knew that when fighting in the sky, the death sentence was practically given to those without a flying mount. Without any hesitation, he slashed out with his sword, transforming into a gigantic sword beam that tore towards Zhou Wen. The few youths behind him who weren't using avian mounts also used their own primordial energy skills. Together with John, they surrounded Zhou Wen. Several beams of light instantly intersected with each other, nearly sealing off all possible routes of retreat for Zhou Wen. This was difficult to avoid even on land, much less when in the air. Article 203 of 1597. Chapter 203, A Man Doesn't Need Wings. Zhou Wen, you won't be able to escape today even if you have wings. I will return the humiliation you made me suffer at Sunset College with interest. The sword of judgment in John's hand slashed down. More than 10 companion beasts spat out all sorts of light blasts as they worked with the humans to attack the encircled Zhou Wen in the air. From the looks of it, it was impossible for him to escape. Unperturbed, Zhou Wen continued to rise with bamboo blade in hand. At the instant light of judgment and the numerous attacks were about to land on him, Zhou Wen exerted strength in his legs as though he had stepped on an invisible staircase in the air. He accelerated rapidly and changed his trajectory to avoid John's light of judgment. John and company thought they were seeing things. John was right. Zhou Wen was indeed unable to escape if he had wings. Even a real bird would probably not be able to escape the encirclement. Furthermore, Zhou Wen didn't have any wings on his back, but he seemed to be walking on flat ground in the air. It was as though he could move as he pleased. Zhou Wen moved erratically in the sky. In a completely impossible situation, he tore through John and company's encirclement and, like a ghost, rushed in front of a youth riding on a flying bird. The youth wasn't a weakling either. He drew his saber and slashed at Zhou Wen, condensing potent battle aura into a corporeal blade beam. Zhou Wen spun like an eagle as he dodged the attack, brushing past the bird. Bamboo blade instantly unsheathed itself and flashed like a cold beam of light. After Zhou Wen flew several meters away, the bird split into two and blood splattered across the sky. Instantly, John and company felt their bodies turn cold. It wasn't as if they had never seen anyone with better movement techniques and saber techniques than Zhou Wen, but in the sky, to be able to fly freely without any external help was terrifying. It would be courting death to fight someone like him in the sky. Unfortunately, they came to that realization too late. Zhou Wen was like a specter in the sky as his body flashed. He slashed out again and again with bamboo blade, aiming for the mounts instead of their owners. Just as John had said, if one did not have a mount in the sky, death was almost a certainty. Those who relied on their mounts clearly couldn't be as agile as Zhou Wen. With the difficulty of dodging plaguing them, they watched their own mounts being killed. Blood filled the sky and feathers poured down like snow. The youth whose mount had been sliced apart cried out tragically as he fell to the ground. Everyone, return to the ground. John shouted out loudly, feeling extremely infuriated. He originally thought that killing Zhou Wen in midair was a plan that would be foolproof, but who knew that this would end up becoming their greatest disadvantage? Ah! Tragic screams were heard constantly as people fell onto boulders, fracturing their legs. Only a few people with backup flying pets and flying equipment were spared. Fortunately, these fellows were all from the families of the 6 League heroes and were the children of the League's wealthiest. They had plenty of good things on them, so they didn't fall to their deaths. The ones that had been roped in to make up the numbers suffered terribly from the fall. John tried his best to control his flying lion, hoping to land back on the ground, but Zhou Wen was too agile in the air. He eventually managed to cleave off the head of the flying lion. John was infuriated as a pair of snow-white wings sprouted from his back. However, he didn't charge at Zhou Wen and he sped towards the ground. Even with wings, John didn't dare fight Zhou Wen in midair. The mobility his wings gave him was on a completely different level from Zhou Wen's aerial combat ability. How could Zhou Wen let him off? The saber was like a rainbow as it chopped at John repeatedly. Although it wasn't able to kill him, it had severed one of his wings. John lost control of his body and fell to the mountain peak below. He almost broke his bones in the process. Li Xuan was dumbfounded as he could not help but laugh out loud. Indeed, you can't escape even if you have wings. John, you're really an honest person. Zhou Wen had no intention of letting them off. He charged straight for the mountain peak and landed on it. The group blamed the terrible loss they suffered for their immobility in the sky. So now that Zhou Wen had dared to land, they didn't miss this opportunity and immediately surrounded him. A stocky man held a huge shield with one hand and a huge hammer in the other as he charged straight at Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen didn't draw his saber. Instead, he struck out with a gust of grand yin wind with the banana fan, sending the man's hammer and shield flying. With a loud bang, the man slammed into the mountain like a cannonball, creating a crater in the wall. His hammer and shield flew out of his hand as blood spewed out of his mouth. His hair and brows were covered in a layer of frost. After struggling a few times, the man was unable to stand up. As expected. There's something on John that counters the grand yin wind, preventing him from suffering its effects. After coming to this realization, Zhou Wen had switched his primordial energy art into Tao Sutra. His life providence then turned into the Tao body that could constantly restore his primordial energy. Seeing a few more people charging at him, Zhou Wen waved his fan again. The few of them were instantly blown away and their bones fractured from the fall. They rolled on the ground screaming. Seeing that Zhou Wen had taken care of the dozen or so people with a few flaps of the fan, John turned around and tried to escape. Didn't you want to fight me? Zhou Wen wasn't willing to let him off as he slashed his bamboo blade at John's back with a cold beam. John raised his sword to block, one that was transformed from a legendary companion egg. Bamboo blade immediately snapped it and didn't stop as it hit John's armor, leaving a foot-long wound on his armor. Blood immediately gushed out. John's expression changed drastically. As he retreated, he summoned his companion beast, hoping to fend off Zhou Wen. Unfortunately, he was already in a state of frenzy. He had no intention of using the companion beasts to battle Zhou Wen. All he wanted was for them to hold Zhou Wen back so that he could escape. The bamboo blade in Zhou Wen's hand shimmered as the legendary companion beasts were cleanly sliced through with a single slash. Before John could run far, Zhou Wen's palm struck his back, sending blood spewing from him as he fell to the ground. It only took moments to have more than 10 people collapsed on the ground. Not a single one of them could get up. Kill me if you have the guts. John shouted angrily when he saw Zhou Wen stepping on his chest. Wouldn't killing you be too easy on you? Zhou Wen thrust out his bamboo blade and pierced through John's primordial energy sea. Zhou Wen, this isn't over. John wailed in excruciating pain, eager to rip Zhou Wen to shreds. You aren't qualified, Zhou Wen said coldly. He waved his bamboo blade once again and tore off John's armor, revealing a strange necklace around John's neck. There was crystal embedded in the necklace, and within the crystal, there seemed to be swirling wind. It formed a vortex within, making it look rather special. It looks like it was this item that caused Grand Yin Wind to lose its effects. Zhou Wen raised his saber and broke the necklace's latch, allowing it to fall into his hands. Article 204 of 1597. Li Xuan's eyes lit up when he saw the necklace. He could not help but cry out, is that the goddess of wind's protection? You know what this is? Zhou Wen asked as he held the necklace. I've only heard that there are extraordinary treasures in some dimensional zones. Those treasures possess magical powers. The goddess of wind's protection is one of them. Legend has it that it's a magical necklace that possesses the power of the wind. Wearing it can give you damage immunity from any wind element. However, according to what I know, the goddess of wind's protection likely belongs to the Kamar family. Furthermore, it's unique, so I've no idea if it's real or not, Li Xuan explained. It doesn't matter if it's real or fake. Zhou Wen stuffed the necklace into his pocket. Since this item could resist the Grand Yin Wind, he naturally didn't want anyone else to possess it. When John saw this scene, he was so angry that he vomited blood. The necklace was indeed the goddess of wind's protection. In order to counter Zhou Wen's banana fan, Member of Parliament Cape had paid a huge price to borrow it from the Kamar family. Now it had been snatched away by Zhou Wen. Zhou Wen ignored John as he walked towards the others with the bamboo blade in hand. He ignored their pleas or insults as he stabbed through their primordial energy sea. Quite a number of people fainted either from the pain or anger. Li Xuan, help me search. They must have bought quite a number of companion eggs at the market before they came. Let's see if they still have any on them. As Zhou Wen spoke, he personally pulled away a young man's clothes and found 2 companion eggs. Li Xuan didn't stand on ceremony either as he rummaged through the bodies of the rest. Soon, they had found 14 companion eggs which were likely at the legendary stage. As for what type they were, it wasn't possible for them to tell immediately. John and company seethed in anger with clenched teeth. Back then, Tianzuo had crippled his peers, but he didn't do anything else. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan were even more ruthless. Not only did he cripple them, he even took everything from them. Let's go. After searching, Zhou Wen turned around and left, ignoring John and company. Old Zhou, what sort of movement technique was that? It's way too cool. You actually managed to float in midair like Superman, Li Xuan asked Zhou Wen as he looked at him enviously. Clearly, he was somewhat tempted. That's not a movement technique. Unless you give up the invincible Kanate divine art, you can forget about it, Zhou Wen told a half-truth. Even if Li Xuan was willing to give up the invincible Kanate divine art, he might not be able to master the Godfiend era. Zhou Wen's Godfiend era was simulated by the Lost Immortal Sutra, not that he had succeeded in cultivating it. When Li Xuan heard that, he heaved a sigh of relief and said depressingly, forget it. Although flying in the air is very cool, I'm not bad either. The two of them headed east. They knew that Kanate Holy Temple was in the east from maps drawn by their predecessors. However, the exact location was unclear. Every time someone entered the Holy Land, the map they drew was different, but the general location of the Holy Temple's temple was never wrong. There were no dimensional creatures in the Holy Land, so the duo didn't encounter any danger. After walking for more than half a day, they saw a sea in front of them. On the cliff by the seaside stood an ancient purple building. It should be there. Li Xuan was delighted as he got Zhou Wen to rush over. By the time they reached the ancient building, there were already several youths standing in front of the building. Clearly, they were all here to receive the Kanate Holy Temple's test. When they saw Zhou Wen, they were slightly taken aback. They were somewhat suspicious, as though they were wondering how Zhou Wen had managed to come this far. From their expressions, Zhou Wen knew that these people definitely knew that John was about to besiege him and Li Xuan. Zhou Wen, you sure are lucky. You actually weren't stopped by John and the rest, said a black-robed youth coldly. My luck has always been pretty good, Zhou Wen said. However, your luck has come to an end. My goal is in Jing. I found it beneath me to fight you, but since she didn't come and that useless bum, John, failed to stop you, I just can't let you return whole now that you have come to me yourself. I have to leave some mark on you to show in Tianzuo when you return, the youth in black said arrogantly. What's with all the nonsense? If you want to attack, hurry up. Don't delay us from accepting the Kanate Holy Temple's test, Zhou Wen said casually. Without another word, the black-robed youth released terrifying black flames from his body. He threw a punch at Zhou Wen like an erupting volcano. Zhou Wen didn't use the banana fan. Instead, he switched his primordial energy art to the ancient Imperial Sutra and struck out with ashen palm, meeting the black-robed youth's fist. As their fist and palm met, the youth in black felt a scorching pain in his visceral organs. He opened his mouth and spat out a large pool of blood as his body limply collapsed to the ground. The smiles on the faces of the youths beside him froze and a chill ran down their spines. They knew the strength of the black-robed youth very well. He was rather famous among the 6 hero families and was in no way inferior to John. However, he couldn't even withstand Zhou Wen's strike. Could this be another in Tianzuo? They had an ominous feeling. In the middle of the mountains, a beautiful butterfly leisurely flew past and, surprisingly, there was a person sitting on its back. As the butterfly flew, the person revealed a look of surprise. The butterfly changed its direction and landed on a mountain peak. More than 10 people were lying on the mountaintop, moaning in pain. It was John's group. Lance, you're finally here. John was overjoyed when he saw the person on the butterfly's back. What happened? Lance looked at John and the others while asking in surprise. We had our primordial energy destroyed by Zhou Wen. He even stole our things, John recounted what had happened through gritted teeth. Finally, he pleaded. That Zhou Wen has powerful companion beasts aiding him and we weren't his match. Now, you are the only one who can maintain the dignity of our 6 hero families. Perhaps no one else is his match. This Zhou Wen is rather interesting, but I've already said that I'm not interested in him. Furthermore, you were the ones who went knocking on his door and ended up being crippled by him. You only have yourselves to blame for your lacking skills. As Lance spoke, he patted the butterfly beneath him and it immediately rose up and left the mountain. John and the others were stunned. They didn't expect that Lance would actually disregard the solidarity between the 6 hero families. Article 205 of 1597. Chapter 205 The Holy Temple's Invitation. Zhou Wen sat on the stone steps outside the Kanate Holy Temple to game while Li Xuan entered to take the test. The youth in black and the few others had long disappeared. The youth's primordial energy had been destroyed and he had even had his possessions robbed from him. They didn't dare stay here any longer. Zhou Wen couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed that he had died once again at the hands of the golden flying ant. He didn't know how many times he had been killed by it, yet he had failed to touch the white cocoon. Zhou Wen really wanted to know what was inside the white cocoon. Why are you the only one here? Did no one else come here to the Kanate Holy Temple? Just as Zhou Wen was about to restart his game, he saw a man descending on a butterfly. The man glanced at the sealed temple door and then looked at Zhou Wen. There's another person inside the holy temple, Zhou Wen replied when he saw that the man didn't harbor any ill intentions. After alighting from the butterfly's back, Lance unsummoned the butterfly and looked at Zhou Wen's phone. I enjoy playing mobile games too. However, I play fighting games. These kinds of repetitive games aren't suitable for me. Saying that, Lance took out his cell phone and launched a game. It's a pity that the magnetic field here is too unstable and causes excessive signal interference. Otherwise, we could network and play together. I don't play fighting games, Zhou Wen said. That's such a pity. Lance seemed a little disappointed as he sat down on the steps beside him. As he gamed, he asked, Are you also interested in the Khanate Holy Temple? No, I'm just accompanying a friend here to take a look. Are you also here to accept its test? Zhou Wen asked. Well, not really. I'm only here to see what the Khanate Holy Temple looks like. I have no intention of receiving the Khanate Holy Temple's special physique. Zhou Wen found this person rather interesting. As he spoke, he played games. His actions and thoughts didn't conflict and his handling was extremely fine. This wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Since you came to the Khanate Holy Temple, why don't you give it a try? Perhaps there might be a chance of obtaining a Khanate Infinite Physique, Zhou Wen asked with interest. While playing games, Lance said, It's not only the Khanate Infinite Physique, I'm actually not interested in any of the special physiques in the Holy Land. It's just that my family insists that I come. So, I came to take a look and since I'm here, I might as well visit all the holy temples. I'll just treat it as a vacation. You sure are interesting. Zhou Wen found this person interesting. You're very interesting too. I've heard of people vying for the nominations here in the Holy Land, but never about someone here to accompany their friend, Lance said with a smile. I plan on vying for them too, but I don't have my sights on the Khanate Infinite Physique, Zhou Wen said. Lance lowered his phone and sized up Zhou Wen for a moment before saying, The 6 types of physiques in the Holy Land have their own advantages and weaknesses. This Khanate Infinite Physique has very high requirements on one's body, so ordinary people are unable to meet the requirements. According to what I know, in the League, only those who cultivate in the invincible Khanate divine art can barely meet the requirements. From the looks of it, you don't look like someone who cultivates in it. Your aura is a little odd. I'm afraid it's not compatible with any of the Holy Temple's special physiques. If you wish to vie for one, the difficulty might be higher than the others. Human effort can achieve anything. Zhou Wen wasn't willing to elaborate on his matters, but he was rather interested in Lance. He asked, Why don't you want a special physique? This is something many want to vie for. It's precisely because everyone wants it. It's been so many years and although there aren't many people with the 6 special physiques in the League, there are still quite a number of them. There's no point in me obtaining what others have. It's rather pointless, so I might as well not get it. Besides, Tianzuo of the Yin family doesn't have any special physiques. Yet, he can suppress his peers. And if he can do it, so can I. Lance seldom shared such thoughts, but for some reason, he mentioned it in passing to Zhou Wen. Upon hearing Tianzuo's name, Zhou Wen's expression turned odd. You know Tianzuo? Lance acutely guessed that Zhou Wen knew Tianzuo from his expression. Yes, but we aren't on good terms. If you wish to ask me about him, I'm afraid you will be disappointed, Zhou Wen said with a shrug. There's no need. There's no need. Please don't tell me anything about Tianzuo. Lance hurriedly waved his hands. Why is that? Zhou Wen looked at Lance in puzzlement. I will personally defeat him in the future. If I hear about him now, it will be too boring if I end up learning about his weaknesses. The Tianzuo I want to defeat is the strongest Tianzuo I can face, said Lance solemnly. Zhou Wen thought to himself, from the looks of it, this person should also be from the 6 hero families. Otherwise, he wouldn't be thinking about defeating Tianzuo all day. However, it's strange. Doesn't he know that I'm the one coming on behalf of the Yin family? After chatting for a while, they seemed to get along pretty well. They also talked about their experience in cultivation and martial techniques. Although they understood things differently, they shared concepts that were congruent with each other. As the two were chatting, they suddenly saw the door to the temple open. Li Xuan walked out. How was it? Zhou Wen got up and asked. I passed, but I've no idea if anyone will have better results than mine. We'll know in 10 days, Li Xuan said with a smile. I'm done. Which holy temple do you want to head to? I'll accompany you. At that moment, Li Xuan saw Lance. Clearly, he didn't know him. Seeing that he and Zhou Wen seemed to get along pretty well, he asked curiously, Who is this? Someone you know. I just got to know him. Only then did Zhou Wen recall that he didn't know of his name. Neither of them had said their names. Lance stood up and said, It's time for me to go in. See you again if there's a chance. However, before Lance could enter the Khanate Holy Temple, a worm statue coiled around a stone pillar in front of the door suddenly opened its eyes. Its body moved as it came alive. It stretched out its head and stared at Zhou Wen. Are you willing to be the representative of my Khanate Holy Temple? The 3 of them were slightly taken aback. Lance looked at Zhou Wen with a strange expression. As a member of the 6 hero families, he had never heard of anyone receiving an invitation from a holy temple. Even the first 6 heroes who came to the Holy Land had only been chosen after many trials. It was the first time he had seen an invitation extended by the Holy Temple. Zhou Wen, what are you waiting for? Quick, agree. Li Xuan hurriedly nudged Zhou Wen when he saw him in a daze. However, Zhou Wen wasn't feeling happy about being invited. The reason he was stunned was because after the worm sent out the invitation, his life providence, Sai of the King, seemed to be in a frenzy. A sense of disgust spread through him, affecting him with those emotions. Article 206 of 1597. Chapter 206, Who's the Real Scion? Chapter 206, Who's the Real Scion? That feeling was intense, so intense that Zhou Wen didn't hesitate to reject it. Sorry, I only accompanied my friend here to take a look. I don't wish to obtain anything from the Khanate Holy Temple. The worm shot Zhou Wen a look again before slowly retreating back to the stone pillar and slowly transforming into a lifeless statue. Lance looked at Zhou Wen with piqued interest. Li Xuan sighed and said, Old Zhou, if you rejected it because of me, I will be touched and also sad. That's not it. Khanate infinite physique wasn't my goal to begin with. Even without you, I would still reject it. Zhou Wen was telling the truth. That makes me even more depressed, Li Xuan joked. Let's go and visit the other holy temples. Zhou Wen only wanted to visit the other holy temples to take a look. The Sai of the King was a result of his own attributes in the Lost Immortal Sutra, but now that the Sai of the King had ostracized the Holy Temple, it was likely difficult for Zhou Wen's original advancement plan to succeed. If I can't use a special physique to raise my stats to 21 points, how can I advance to the epic stage? Zhou Wen was puzzled. This fellow sure is interesting. Seeing Zhou Wen and Li Xuan leave, Lance turned and entered the Khanate Holy Temple. Zhou Wen and Li Xuan rushed to the Sun God Temple, not because of the Sun Strafe art, but because it was closest to the Khanate Holy Temple. However, they did not know that the members of the 6 hero families were already gathered together, discussing how to deal with Zhou Wen. Previously, when Liz had gone to the various families to seek their cooperation, most of the members of the 6 hero families thought nothing of it. They felt that there was no need for them to involve themselves in dealing with Zhou Wen since Jing wasn't coming. However, who knew that John would have his primordial energy crippled by Zhou Wen despite leading more than 10 people to teach him a lesson? Even the black-robed youth of the Zia family had been crippled. Zhou Wen appeared to be another in Tianzuo, making many of the members of the 6 hero families find it unbearable. And Tianzuo has already humiliated our 6 families. Now, there's another, Zhou Wen. Such a tendency cannot be encouraged. What do you think? Zia Bing said coldly. The black-robed youth that Zhou Wen had robbed of his primordial energy in front of the Khanate Holy Temple was Zia Bing's younger brother. Originally, I couldn't be bothered with him, but I never expected him to be so outrageous. We should really teach him a lesson. Otherwise, others will think that we are easily bullied. In the future, anyone will dare to bully us, Dugu Chuan of the Dugu family added. Zhou Wen has to be crippled. However, he has an abnormally powerful companion beast on him. It can transform into a fan that can even withstand my light of judgment. If we can't deal with the fan, I'm afraid it will be difficult to subdue him, John said weakly. A companion beast primordial energy skill that even the light of judgment can't withstand is something we have to be wary of. If only the goddess of wind's protection was here. That treasure is most resistant to wind elemental powers, said Zia Bing. John said with a bitter smile, I did bring the goddess of wind's protection, but Zhou Wen snatched it away. However, even with the goddess of wind's protection, it was useless. After all, that item can only protect one person. The others will still be injured by the fan's strength. Zia Bing and company were taken aback when they heard that. They never expected John to spend that much. He had even brought the goddess of wind's protection. It was a pity that Zhou Wen had robbed it from him. Dugu Chuan pondered for a moment before saying, such a primordial energy skill definitely expends a great deal of primordial energy. All we need to do is use a tag team strategy and expend his primordial energy. That way, it will be useless even if he has the fan. John hurriedly shook his head and said, this method won't work. When we were fighting him previously, he used it 6 times during the battle. However, he still had plenty of primordial energy to use other primordial energy skills. I believe he has some treasure that can rapidly recover his primordial energy. In that case, it's really a big problem. Dugu Chuan frowned. It's not much trouble. Leave that fan to me, Zia Bing said. Zia Bing, are you confident? We can't fail again. Otherwise the 6 hero families will become laughingstocks, Dugu Chuan said. It's not convenient for me to elaborate on the details, but don't worry. As long as I confirm that the fan is a manifestation of the wind elemental companion beast, I have a 100% chance of making it useless. Zia Bing was confident. Alright, I'll leave the fan problem to you. Let's find Zhou Wen now, said Dugu Chuan as he stood up. Wait, John called out to him. Is there anything else? Dugu Chuan frowned. John coughed lightly and said, besides possessing that fan, Zhou Wen is also very skilled in flight. Without using any flying companion beasts or mounts, he is able to move freely in the sky, almost like Superman. I wonder what primordial energy skill he cultivates in or what kind of flying treasure he possesses. You have to be constantly on guard when you head over. Don't let him use his flying abilities to escape. Is it a wind elemental flying skill? Zia Bing asked. I don't think so. I didn't sense the power of the wind on him. John shook his head. This is a little troublesome. If it's not a wind elemental flying skill, I won't be able to do anything to him, Zia Bing said with a frown. Leave this problem to me. I promise I won't let him escape, said a blonde youth. When Zia Bing and Dugu Chuan saw that the person who spoke was pros, they all nodded slightly. They fully trusted his abilities and didn't say anything else other than prepare to set off. Wait, John called out to them again. What else is there? Zia Bing was getting impatient. Zhou Wen still has a saber. It's extremely sharp. My legendary snake of brilliance was easily chopped apart by it. Also, the flying mounts we used previously were also split into two with a single strike. You have to be careful, John added. What else do you know? Say it all at once. Dugu Chuan already had a headache. A terrifying pet, a powerful flying skill, and an extremely sharp weapon. Any one of these items was enough to make an ordinary person world famous. Yet, Zhou Wen actually had all three at the same time. It was no wonder that even John had been defeated by him. It wasn't simply because of his incompetence. There's nothing else. By the way, Zhou Wen still has a companion beast. Its defensive strength is extremely high, making it difficult for ordinary legendary weapons to injure it. There's also a night pet that has a powerful offensive and destructive power, John added after some thought. Dugu Chuan, Zia Bing, and company looked at John as a thought arose in their minds. Who's the real scion? Aren't our 6 hero families the most powerful and rich families in the alliance? Why does it seem like Zhou Wen is richer than us? Article 207 of 1597. When Zhou Wen and Li Xuan arrived at Sun God Temple, they were somewhat surprised to discover that there wasn't a single person in front of it. Furthermore, the temple's main door was open, proving that no one was undergoing a test. That's odd. Is the Sun God Temple that unpopular? Why isn't anyone here undergoing the test? Li Xuan looked around in puzzlement. Indeed, there was no one. We came rather late after being caught up with matters. Perhaps the people who came here to take the test have already left. Zhou Wen walked towards the Sun God Temple's interior, intending to give it a try. He wanted to know if the Sun God Temple really ostracized the special physiques. After Zhou Wen entered the temple, the door automatically closed. Li Xuan sat on the stone steps outside and waited for him. However, just as he sat down, he saw a group of people walk over. When Li Xuan took a glance, his expression changed drastically. His lackadaisical appearance instantly vanished as his expression turned solemn. The people who approached were all members of the 6 hero families, so it was obviously not a coincidence that they were here together. You are Li Xuan from Luang's Li family. Nearly 50 people surrounded the temple as Zia Bing sized up Li Xuan. I'm Li Xuan. Hello, Miss Zia. Li Xuan bowed slightly at Zia Bing. Li Xuan recognized Zia Bing. Among the 6 great hero families, the Zia family had its roots in the East District. It was the biggest and wealthiest family there. Even though the Li family was considered a wealthy family in Luang, it was nothing compared to the Zia family. Furthermore, the Li family and the Zia family had business dealings and had many connections. Even the Li family's invincible Kannate divine art was obtained from the Zia family. Since you addressed me as Miss Zia, I'll let you leave on account of your father and second brother. Don't interact with people like Zhou Wen again. It won't do you any good, Zia Bing said as she walked towards the main door. Miss Zia, Zhou Wen is undergoing a test inside. You can't enter now, Li Xuan said with a smile, but he didn't make way. We are precisely waiting for him to take the test. Does he really think he can obtain the Sun God body? And Tianzuo failed to obtain it. It will be the same for him. Furthermore, he has to pay the price, said Pros disdainfully. What do you mean? Li Xuan's smile deepened, but he realized that something was amiss. Although Li Xuan didn't know what they had done, things were definitely not that simple. Logically speaking, outsiders wouldn't be able to enter the temple during someone's test, nor would they be able to disturb the people inside. However, from the way Pros spoke, they clearly had a way of influencing Zhou Wen who was undergoing the trial. They might even be able to deal him some form of damage. Cut the crap and get out of my way. Zia Bing was already impatient. She was infuriated that her brother had his primordial energy sea crippled by Zhou Wen. She couldn't wait to personally destroy Zhou Wen's primordial energy sea. Miss Zia, what are you planning to do? Li Xuan didn't move as he continued to block her way. Zia Bing frowned slightly as she stared at Li Xuan and said, Li Xuan, do you have a death wish? Seeing that he couldn't get anything out of her, Li Xuan wiped away his smile and looked at Zia Bing. Miss Zia, I really don't wish to be enemies with you. However, the person undergoing the test is my friend. I haven't had friends since I was young, and 2 of my friends died not long ago. It greatly upset me, so I really do not wish to see my friend get hurt. Can you tell me what you wish to do to Zhou Wen? To have the courage to say such things, Luang's Li family can be considered quite impressive. However, you have to understand your limits, or you might not be able to bear the consequences, Xia Bing said. Cut the crap with him. I'll finish him off first before destroying Zhou Wen's trial. Without Xia Bing's patience, Pros threw a punch at Li Xuan. The fist flashed with terrifying lightning, bringing about horrifying beams of light. Li Xuan raised his fist to receive the punch. When the fists collided, Li Xuan's body immediately trembled, as though he had been electrocuted before he was sent flying by Pros's punch. Li Xuan's body slammed into the Sun God Temple's door and he immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he stumbled to his feet and walked back to Pros with gritted teeth. You are courting death. With another punch, Pros's lightning-like punch sent Li Xuan flying once again. It looked like Li Xuan was even more miserable than the last time. However, Li Xuan still stubbornly walked back. He looked like he was about to lose his footing, as though a gust of wind would topple him. Pros frowned and said, Li Xuan, do you really want to die here? Is it worth it for Zhou Wen? I don't want to see my friend get hurt again. Let him off, please. Li Xuan muttered. Pros, don't waste any more time. Just cripple him, said Du Guchuan. With a nod, Pros punched Li Xuan again, but this time he struck Li Xuan's abdomen. Typically, when a person cultivated in a primordial energy art, they would need to store their primordial energy in one area. This area was the primordial energy sea, but the locations varied depending on the primordial energy art. Most of the primordial energy sea was in the lower dantian, which was where the abdomen was. If the primordial energy sea was crippled, primordial energy would leak, making it impossible to store any more primordial energy. It was equivalent to being crippled. There were also some primordial energy arts that had primordial energy seas not in the lower dantian, and that made it more difficult to find. Pros didn't know where Li Xuan's primordial energy sea was, so he first attacked Li Xuan's abdomen. If his primordial energy sea was there, such a terrifying lightning blast could penetrate his primordial energy, causing his primordial energy to leak and turn him into a cripple. Bam! Li Xuan was sent flying once again. He looked even more miserable than before. He struggled to get up, but he staggered around, unable to even stand properly. Yet, he still attempted to get up and walk back. Everyone was perturbed. There were not many people in this era who would be so foolish for their friends. However, Xia Bing suddenly said with an odd expression, something's not right. His body has a jade-like luster, and his eyes are faintly glowing. It's a sign that he has mastered the invincible Kannate divine art. Such injuries are nothing to a legendary who has cultivated the invincible Kannate divine art. Furthermore, his primordial energy sea isn't in his lower dantian. It's impossible for him to be in such a wretched state. Xia Bing's words left everyone stunned. When Li Xuan heard Xia Bing's words, his staggering body also straightened up. Wiping away the blood from his mouth, his entire bearing changed. From the looks of it, I can't hide it from you, Miss Xia. Li Xuan sighed slightly. He originally wanted to stall for time, but unfortunately, with Xia Bing, who was familiar with the invincible Kannate divine art, there was no use no matter how superb his acting was. When Pros saw that he had been fooled, he was immediately enraged. The lightning on his body flared as the bolts of lightning around his fist struck Li Xuan like a sun. Li Xuan didn't retreat, instead, he advanced. A heavy sword that was wrapped in lightning appeared in his hand. Lightning flashed on the sword as it headed straight for Pros's fist. Boom. Two types of lightning exploded in the sky, only to reveal Li Xuan standing proudly on the stone steps with his heavy sword in hand. As for Pros, he had taken a few steps back and spat out a mouthful of blood. Article 208 of 1597. Everyone was astonished. Even among the 6 hero families, Pros was rather famous. It was truly shocking that he had been defeated by Li Xuan. Isn't that Thunder God General? The one he bought at the trading market actually had the Thunder God augmentation skill. How lucky. Immediately, someone recognized the Thunder God sword in Li Xuan's hand. He's really lucky. He bought a Thunder God General with Thunder God augmentation for only 2 million. This punk is really lucky, someone said jealously. Back at the trading market, Li Xuan's spending of 2 million to buy a Thunder God companion egg had made him the target of mockery. It was a companion egg that could be bought for 400,000 to 500,000 outside, yet he chose to spend 2 million here. It was an act of a fool. However, when they saw Thunder God General with Thunder God augmentation, many of them turned green with envy. The Thunder God General was the best offensive pet among legendaries. Even a fellow like Pros, who was adept at lightning elemental forces, suffered quite a bit. So Pros, who claims to be the son of lightning, is nothing much after all. He can't even defeat the lightning forces of a companion beast. How disappointing. Li Xuan wanted to infuriate Pros and make him fight him alone. That way, he could delay things. Pros, he's deliberately trying to provoke you to stall for time, Xia Bing said. Pros nodded slightly as lightning flickered in his golden pupils. He stared at Li Xuan and said, You've successfully provoked me, so die. However, he wasn't the only one who made a move. A few members of the 6 hero families attacked Li Xuan in a bid to finish him off in the fastest time possible before destroying Zhou Wen's trial. I've been unknown for 16 years. Today, I'm fighting the masses with one sword. I don't seek a place in history, only an eternal name. Li Xuan held the Thunder God sword in hand and stood proudly in front of the Sun God Temple. This was the first time he had looked this serious. The sword struck out like lightning, causing ripples to form as it surged towards the attacks of his assailants. When Zhou Wen walked into the temple, he originally thought of it as merely a palace, but after entering it, he realized that the inside of the temple was a void. In this void, there was a sun hanging high above. It emitted an extremely resplendent divine light, as though it was the center of this empty universe. At Zhou Wen's feet were a stone staircase floating in the void, one that extended towards the sun. Pathseeker, step on the stone steps and walk towards the sun. The closer you are to the sun, the more likely it is for you to obtain the god of the sun's power. An ethereal voice sounded in the void. Zhou Wen didn't sense any abnormal reaction from the sigh of the king as he walked towards the stone steps ahead. After taking a few steps, he felt the temperature around him increase significantly. The temperature had risen quickly. After walking more than 10 steps, Zhou Wen felt as though he had walked into a furnace. On the other hand, the chick on his shoulder looked like it was enjoying itself, as if this heat made it very comfortable. Before Zhou Wen entered the hall, he had switched the primordial energy art to the ancient Imperial Sutra. The ancient Imperial Sutra also seemed to have a portion of the power of fire, but it was completely different from the power of the Sun God Temple. Zhou Wen originally believed that ancient Imperial Sutra's powers of a similar trait would allow him to take advantage of the situation, but now he realized that that wasn't the case. Despite using all his strength to resist the sun's mighty splendor, he was already covered in sweat after taking about 20 steps. If he continued walking another 10 steps, he might end up dehydrated by the sun. With no other choice, Zhou Wen had no choice but to activate his Lotus Flower Buddha Body primordial energy skill to resist the sun god's splendor. But even so, he only managed to take a few more steps. He was still a long way from the sun in the void. From the looks of it, ordinary people can't withstand the power of the sun god temple. Unless they cultivate in a corresponding primordial energy art and receive the recognition of the temple, otherwise even an epic expert wouldn't be able to walk to the front of the sun. Zhou Wen already had the intention to retreat. He was only here to seek out a way to break through, not to risk his life. Since he knew that there was no possibility, there was no need to continue. Just as Zhou Wen was about to retreat, the ancient Imperial Sutra inside him automatically changed back into the Lost Immortal Sutra. The Lost Immortal Sutra slowly circulated as the originally ethereal Lost Immortal Sutra gradually turned warm. As the Lost Immortal Sutra heated up his primordial energy, the sun god's splendor around Zhou Wen's body no longer seemed to be as hot as before. Zhou Wen immediately felt energized. The Lost Immortal Sutra has finally shown its effects. Could it be that there's hope of advancing this time? Zhou Wen was delighted as he dispelled the thought of retreating and continued proceeding. After the Lost Immortal Sutra showed its effects, the effects of the sun god's splendor on him grew less and less. When it shone on Zhou Wen, he found it comfortably warm. It wasn't anything like the scorching heat from before. If I were to cultivate in the sun strafe art, the effect would probably be like this if I came to the sun god temple, right? Zhou Wen thought to himself as he walked towards the sun. The sun that seemed to be far away also seemed to become much closer. With every step Zhou Wen took, he could sense that he was rapidly approaching the sun. How is this a test? It's clearly a selection. Those who are selected by the temple would be able to get close with a casual stroll, but those who aren't selected will not be able to succeed no matter how hard they try. If not for the fact that the Lost Immortal Sutra is able to fool the terrifying existence here, even if I had advanced to the epic stage, I wouldn't have been able to reach the sun. Indeed, nothing in the world is fair. It's the same for the miraculous sun god temple. As he pondered, Zhou Wen was getting closer and closer to the sun. The sun was no longer as blinding as before, allowing him to see it clearly. It turned out that it wasn't a sun, but a golden seed. It looked like a pine nut, and its entire body was like a golden crystal. The seed emitted light and heat, making it look like a sun. Zhou Wen glanced at the chick on his shoulder and was surprised to see it still looking relaxed. It didn't seem to be affected by the sun's temperature at all. He had the Lost Immortal Sutra that played the role of confusing the sun god temple's mechanism, therefore he wasn't suppressed by the power of the sun god temple. This was how he had managed to reach this point. However, the chick didn't have the Lost Immortal Sutra. The fact that it relied on its body to withstand the forces made it rather terrifying. I wonder what level this chick's mother is. From its appearance, it's unlikely that its mother is as simple as an epic creature. Zhou Wen proceeded forward step by step, approaching the seed without suffering any effects. Finally, when Zhou Wen was on the last stone step, the seed floated inches away from him. All he needed to do was stretch out his hand to obtain the sun-like seed. Article 209 of 1597. Outside, Li Xuan had his back against the temple's door. He brandished the Thunder God sword crazily, blocking one attack after another. However, no matter how powerful he was, he couldn't withstand all the attack sword beams, battle aura, flames, ice, and various powers tore through the flaws in his moves, tearing apart the armor he was wearing. Even his three-eyed golden warrior's golden silk soft armor was damaged from the numerous attacks. A terrifying sword beam directly tore through Li Xuan's body of flesh and blood. The powerful battle aura made his bones produce cracking sounds as all kinds of attacks left countless wounds on him. Li Xuan's injuries were now in more than 100 spots. However, he still stood in front of the hall and continued brandishing the Thunder God sword as though he was a tireless war machine. As for the injuries on his body, they healed at an unbelievable speed. Often, wounds that had just been formed would be healed a few seconds later. The wounds seemed to only flow through his body like water, disappearing from a mere flick. Xia Bing and the others were appalled by the rapid recovery of his injuries. Although the invincible Kanate divine art has powerful recovery abilities, he's only at the legendary stage. It can't have such a powerful effect unless there's something wrong with his life providence. Xia Bing had already guessed the reason, and she couldn't help but feel envious and jealous. The invincible Kanate divine art was the first primordial energy art the Xia family had obtained. It also corresponded to the Kanate holy temple. However, the invincible Kanate divine art needed a virgin male to cultivate it. Once he wasn't a virgin, he would become a cripple and it would require cultivating all over again. Therefore, the Xia family would only give up the invincible Kanate divine art unwillingly. Back then, one of the 6 heroes, a Xia family elder, had turned from an invincible hero to an ordinary person in order to get married and have children. In order to prevent such things from happening again, the Xia family's elders had sought out several other primordial energy arts to replace the invincible Kanate divine art. However, the Xia family had no intention of handing the invincible Kanate divine art over to someone else. The Li family had once helped the Xia family a great deal and suggested using the invincible Kanate divine art as an exchange. Although the Xia family had given it to them, it was only a simplified version. It was still far from the true invincible Kanate divine art. Furthermore, without the corresponding Kanate infinite body, the power one was able to use with the invincible Kanate divine art was extremely limited. However, Li Xuan, who was only practicing a simplified version of the invincible Kanate divine art and didn't even have a Kanate infinite body, was able to condense a life providence that was in no way inferior to the Xia family's hero. It was truly enviable. Li Xuan's life providence was clearly different from that of the Xia family's elders. Xia Bing only knew that of a powerful recovery ability, but she wasn't too sure of its exact functions. This fellow is an unkillable monster. There's no point in fighting any further. If we don't quickly enter the Sun God Temple, I'm afraid Zhou Wen will be out soon. All the work we did previously would be for nothing, said Du Guchuan. I know that too, but what can I do? Pros pummeled Li Xuan's chest with his punches, causing it to cave slightly. But in a blink of an eye, his chest bulged once again, as though he had never been injured. I do have a companion beast that should be useful. Although it won't kill him, it can control him. However, with this pet down, I'm afraid you'll have to put in more effort when dealing with Zhou Wen later, said Du Guchuan hesitantly. Aren't you aware of the situation? Let's get rid of this monster first. As long as we destroy Zhou Wen's trial, he'll be severely injured. Will it be difficult for us to cripple him when that happens? Pros said. All right. After some thought, Du Guchuan agreed that it made sense. Without any hesitation, he summoned a companion beast. It was a huge, snow-white spider with blood-colored patterns on its back. The patterns looked like a woman's face. In the next second, the spider transformed into a snow-white pole and landed in Du Guchuan's hands. Soon, he found an opportunity and struck Li Xuan with the snow-white pole. The weapon that looked like a pole instantly transformed into a huge net that bound Li Xuan's body. Du Guchuan pulled the net with all his might, trying to pull Li Xuan away from the door. Li Xuan tried using the Thunder God's sword to slice through the net, but it was stuck to the net. The more he struggled, the tighter the net became. However, Li Xuan was rather powerful. Du Guchuan alone was unable to pull Li Xuan away. Why aren't you helping? Shouted Du Guchuan. A few people beside him rushed over to help him pull the net and soon, Li Xuan's figure was forcibly pulled out. After Du Guchuan pulled Li Xuan away, he said to the nearby pros, we'll hold him back for now. Quickly take action. Don't let Zhou Wen complete the trial. Alright, leave it to me. Don't worry. Without the need for Du Guchuan to mention it, pros had already rushed to the door. Li Xuan wanted to stop him, but there was nothing he could do. Pros carried an item in his arms, a sun disk. He searched the Sun God Temple's main door for a while before he placed the sun disk into a groove on the door. The sun disk fitted perfectly with the door, as if they were born together. The sun disk was left behind by an elder of the Pros family who was also one of the 6 heroes of the past. The physique he obtained was the Sun God body. The sun disk was also an item that the elder had taken out of the Sun God Temple. As the first generation representative of the Sun God Temple, it gave him authority. If his descendants ever inherited the Sun God body's bloodline, then they could bring the sun disk back to the Sun God Temple and use the Sun God body to activate the Sun God body's enhanced trial. An enhanced trial was specially prepared for people with the Sun God body, and its difficulty far exceeded that of ordinary trials. Even people with the Sun God body might not necessarily pass this trial, much less ordinary people. In the past, someone from the Pros family had attempted the enhanced trial at Sun God Temple with a Sun God body, but in the end, not only was he unable to pass the trial, he was even seriously injured. He only fully recovered after 3 to 4 years of recuperation. It was quite a coincidence. Xia Bing and Pros knew that the Yin family had the Sun Strafe art which was most compatible with the Sun God Temple. They believed that Zhou Wen must have cultivated the Sun Strafe art and would come to Sun God Temple to take the test. This was why they set up this trap. Although Zhou Wen didn't cultivate in the Sun Strafe art, it was a coincidence that he came to Sun God Temple. It could only be said that Pros and company hit the mark by fluke. Zhou Wen was just about to reach out to pluck the sun-like seed when he suddenly saw the seed light brighten up, turning abnormally resplendent. Article 210 of 1597. As the seed's temperature rose abnormally, the surrounding temperature also increased abruptly. Terrifying golden flames burned in the entire sun god temple, instantly filling the void. The seed was like a piece of golden glass with golden symbols shimmering within. Zhou Wen jumped in fright as his clothes ignited. He immediately knew that something was amiss. The lost immortal sutra was only masquerading his physique after all. He didn't really possess a sun god body, so if he was consumed by the flames, he would definitely be burnt to ashes. With the golden flames about to engulf him, Zhou Wen was just about to use his summoned banana fan when a cold sensation emanated from his neck as the flames on his body automatically extinguished. Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback as he looked down and realized that the coolness had come from a pendant hanging around his neck. It was the ivory pendant Wang Mingyuan had given him before he left. The pendant that teacher gave me isn't an ordinary item. Zhou Wen was secretly alarmed. Without any time to think, Zhou Wen held the banana fan and attempted to rush out of Sun God Temple. As for the seed, even though he wanted to attempt taking it, he didn't dare to do so. The temperature on it was terrifyingly high, so even metal would melt upon contact. Suddenly, the chick on Zhou Wen's shoulder opened its beak and inhaled. The golden flames surrounding Zhou Wen immediately gushed towards the chick's mouth like a breach of a dam. Zhou Wen watched as the golden flames that filled the sky surged like a heavenly river into the chick's tiny mouth. Its tiny body seemed like a bottomless abyss. All the golden flames, no matter how many were gone the moment they were sucked in. As the golden flames were swallowed, the pale yellow feathers on the chick's body began to show a luster. Its feathers looked fuller with a faint golden glow. The more golden flames it absorbed, the more vibrant its feathers became. It even seemed to have grown bigger in size. Zhou Wen watched as the golden flames in the void were completely absorbed by the chick. The terrifying heat also vanished, leaving the seed glowing like a miniature sun. At that moment, the chick's body had grown to the size of a pigeon. Its feathers were pale gold and looked like a pigeon with a somewhat special color. It's all thanks to you this time. Zhou Wen patted the chick's head and stowed away the banana fan. Although the banana fan's grand yin wind could suppress the golden flames here, Zhou Wen's primordial energy was limited after all. With his Dao body's recovery abilities, it was impossible for him to continuously use the grand yin wind. He would have suffered no matter what. With the flames extinguished, Zhou Wen looked at the golden seed and frowned slightly. The golden symbol in the seed was still coruscating, allowing him to sense the extreme temperatures of the seed. He tried to grab it with his hand, but before his fingers could touch the seed, he felt as though he was scalded by the terrifying heat. Seeing that there was no way for him to obtain the seed, Zhou Wen had an idea. He took out his mysterious phone and aimed at the seed. Indeed, the camera had successfully locked onto the seed. With a snap, the seed immediately vanished and was stored into his phone. Zhou Wen couldn't help but be overjoyed. He hurriedly put away his phone and turned to leave. With the abrupt turn of events happening inside the Sun God Temple, Zhou Wen suspected that something had happened outside. Outside Sun God Temple, Pros and company were waiting for Zhou Wen to come out. Although there were others who wished for him to die there, they knew that he wouldn't die so easily. However, it was likely that he would be severely injured. Facing a heavily injured Zhou Wen would most likely be a lot easier for them. If John hadn't described Zhou Wen as he had, they wouldn't have come up with such a plan. If this were any other time, they would have directly approached Zhou Wen and suppressed him with force. Boom. Finally, the door to the Sun God Temple opened. All of them hurriedly prepared their respective companion beasts and primordial energy skills. They planned on taking Zhou Wen down when he rushed out. However, when they saw the situation inside the Sun God Temple's main door, they were stunned. At the moment the divine palace opened, the carvings and patterns on it began to emit a holy glow. The stone palace that looked ancient was now resplendent in divine light, as though it was a palace found in myths. The portrait of the sun at the highest point of the palace emitted unparalleled light, as though it was announcing something to the world. Why would there be a phenomenon at the Sun God Temple now? Isn't this a phenomenon that will only happen after 10 days? We are still days away before the trial ends. Why is it now? The more Pros spoke, the softer his voice became and the nastier his expression became. He had already understood the only reason for such a situation to take place. Someone had already walked up to the sun seed and taken it away. However, the result of his guess was something that even Pros found unbelievable. Ignoring the fact that using the sun disk could enhance the difficulty of the trial, few people could walk to the sun seed and take it away in an ordinary Sun God Temple trial. Even in their families, only 2 people had done so after all these years. One of them was a first-generation hero, and the other was a person who had inherited the Sun God body bloodline. The latter had obtained the sun seed by undergoing the ordinary trial. As for the enhanced trial, even if one had the Sun God body, no one had ever obtained the sun seed. Zhou Wen naturally didn't have the Sun God body. Pros refused to believe that Zhou Wen was able to obtain it in the enhanced trial. However, no matter how much he refused to believe it, the truth was already in front of him. Zhou Wen had walked out unharmed, even the pigeon on his shoulder was unharmed. Pros, what's going on? Didn't you say that no one can pass the enhanced trial? That without the Sun God body, it's unknown if one can even survive. Seeing Zhou Wen unscathed, Du Guchuan couldn't help but question him. How would I know? Pros was also furious. He too wanted to know what was going on. This was completely different from what he imagined. Now's not the time to talk about this. Let's take down Zhou Wen first and act according to plan. Even if he wasn't injured in the temple, we can still cripple him, Xia Bing said as she drew her sword and attacked Zhou Wen. You guys sure don't know when to quit. Zhou Wen turned his gaze and saw Li Xuan bound in a white net like a fish. He immediately relaxed when he realized that he wasn't in a terrible state. With Xia Bing and the others surrounding him, Zhou Wen held the banana fan and fanned them, sweeping out the grand yin wind. However, to Zhou Wen's surprise, Xia Bing held a calabash in her hand as she directed it at the grand yin wind and sucked it in. The strong wind was sucked into the calabash, leaving nothing behind. Article 211 of 1597.